My name is Kate. I'm 48 years old, and this is the story I never thought I would tell. It's not a confession exactly, more like an unraveling. Because some memories don't live in the mind, they live in the body. And mine has been remembering something I could never explain. For as long as I can remember, I've been afraid of light. Not darkness, light. When I was little, I'd hide under blankets when sunlight spilled too fast through the blinds. If someone switched on a lamp suddenly, I'd flinch before I even saw it. And when lightning struck outside, it wasn't the thunder that scared me. It was the flash, that blinding, silent instant. Because every time light filled the room, something filled my head. A soundless pressure, the smell of smoke, the sense that everything around me was gone. But I was still there, burning inside the brightness. My mother thought I was dramatic. Doctors said it was anxiety. Teachers called me sensitive. But I knew the fear wasn't about the light itself. It was about what came after. I spent my life avoiding brightness, flash photography, fireworks, sunlit windows. Even joy seemed dangerous. Like happiness might shine too brightly, and I would disappear. By the time I turned 40, I thought I had learned to live with it. But that year, something began to change. It started in my dreams. The first one came quietly. A morning dream, the kind that drifts between sleep and waking. I was standing beside a river. The air was heavy, wet with summer. Somewhere nearby, a woman was humming, and a child was laughing. I couldn't see them clearly, just the rippling of the water, greenish blue, reflecting a perfect sky. Then I saw her. A small girl, barefoot, black hair tied with a red ribbon. She was running across a wooden bridge, calling out something I couldn't understand. But her voice filled me with a happiness so pure it hurt. I lifted my hand to wave back. And then it happened. The flash. A light so bright it erased everything. No explosion, no sound. Just expansion. It devoured the air, the sky, the child, the world. And then came the silence. The same silence that used to visit me in childhood. Like a ghost waiting in the white. When I woke up, my face was wet. Not from fear, from grief. Like I'd lost something that belonged to me once. A long, long time ago. The dreams didn't stop. They multiplied. Each one showing me fragments of a world I didn't know but somehow remembered. A hand slipping from mine. A flash of white fabric. A wooden bridge cracking like ice. And that smell scorched earth and rain. I started keeping a notebook beside my bed. Each time I woke up, I'd write what I saw. Sounds, colors, sensations. After weeks, when I read it all together, it didn't look like dreams. It looked like memory. But whose? I began to search. Articles about déjà vu, past lives, trauma, reincarnation, anything that could make sense of it. I told myself I was just curious. But the truth was, I was desperate. One night, deep in an online archive, I found it. A black and white photograph from 1945. Hiroshima. A quiet street. A small shop with paper doors. Late. And near a bridge, a woman holding a little girl's hand. She was wearing a white kimono. The child's hair was tied with a red ribbon. It couldn't be. But I knew it was. The bridge, the angle, even the curve of the river. All of it matched my dream exactly. I stared at the photo for hours. And somewhere deep inside me, a voice whispered words I didn't know I remembered. The sky was on fire. That phrase became my anchor, my curse, and my comfort. Of die. Whenever the fear rose in sunlight, in flashlights, in sudden brightness, I would whisper it under my breath. The sky was on fire. It made no sense, but it felt true, as if naming it gave me control. After that, everything began to blur. Dream and waking life overlapped. Sometimes I'd smell smoke when there was none. Sometimes, walking past a window, I'd feel heat against my face like invisible sunlight. I started to avoid people. Friends stopped calling. Even my husband began to look at me differently. The way people look at something fragile or broken. But I didn't care anymore, because the more I denied it, the stronger it became. I began reading survivor testimonies, hibakusha accounts of Hiroshima. They described the same flash, the same silence, the same burning air. They spoke of heat so sudden it left no time to scream, of shadows seared into walls, of rivers filled with bodies and paper lanterns. Their words crawled under my skin as I recognized them. The details they didn't mention, I could see them too. The cicadas stopping mid-song, the smell of iron and dust, the way sound folds in on itself right before it disappears. How could I know that? How could I remember something my life never lived? For months, I kept the secret. I told no one. But one night, I found myself standing in the dark, staring at the photograph again. And the whisper came back, faint but clear. Go back. It wasn't logic that drove me. It was gravity. Something inside me pulling toward a place I'd never been, but had never left. So 2 years later, I boarded a plane to Japan. The world outside the window looked unreal. Clouds glowing white against an endless blue, like the edge of the same light that had always haunted me. When I arrived in Hiroshima, the city was alive. Children laughing, lights reflecting on glass buildings, people crossing streets lined with trees. It was hard to believe that, decades ago, this place had been nothing but ash. But beneath the calm, something pulsed, a vibration too low to hear, too deep to name, like the earth itself remembered. I walked without direction for hours, through narrow streets, past shrines, over bridges. And then, I saw it, the bridge from my dream. The same gentle curve, the same river, the same silence between breaths. I froze. It felt like the air was bending around me. Everything slowed. Sound, movement, thought. And for a moment, I wasn't in 2023. I was somewhere else. I closed my eyes. And there she was. The girl. The red ribbon catching the wind. Smiling at me like she had been waiting all this time. I felt warmth flood my chest. Grief, joy, recognition, all tangled together. And just like that, I understood. She wasn't haunting me. She was remembering me. That night, I stayed at a small inn near the Peace Park. I couldn't sleep. The walls felt too thin, the air too still. I lit a single candle and opened my notebook. I wrote everything. The dreams, the flash, the bridge, the fear. Every line felt like tracing a scar. And when I finished, I realized the pain had never been only mine. It was older, deeper, a wound passed down through silence. Around midnight, I felt warmth in my hands. I looked down, nothing there. But it felt like someone was holding them. The air smelled faintly of rain and incense. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the light. The next morning, I went to the museum. I thought it would break me, but it didn't. It quieted me. Inside, I saw things that had survived what nothing should. A lunchbox, a melted watch, a piece of fabric, and a red ribbon, charred but still tied in a bow. I couldn't move. The world seemed to narrow to that single point, that single color surviving the fire. And suddenly I felt it, the echo of the moment before the flash, the heartbeat of a world that knew it was ending, the love of a mother holding a child, the terror, the tenderness, the instant of everything vanishing together. I whispered, barely aloud. The sky was on fire. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was remembrance. When I came home, something inside me had changed. I no longer flinched at sunlight. I opened the blinds wide every morning and let the day pour in. Sometimes I still dream. But the river is calm now. The little girl stands beside me, watching the water drift past. She doesn't run anymore. She just smiles. In the last dream, she asked me something without words. I understood it anyway. "Is it over now?" And I said, "Yes. You can rest." When I woke up, my pillow was dry. My hands were warm. And the world felt lighter. I'll ask if I believe I lived another life. I don't know. Maybe memory doesn't belong to one lifetime. Maybe it flows like the river, carrying fragments of all that's been lost, waiting for someone to remember. Maybe some of us return not to relive but to release, to bear witness, to forgive what the light once destroyed. Whatever it is, I know this. Somewhere between fire and silence, between fear and love, a woman and a child found each other again. The sky was on fire. But I survived. And maybe, just maybe, that's why I came back. Not to escape the light, but to see what it really was. Because sometimes, even in the brightest destruction, something survives, waiting quietly to be seen. And when you finally see it, the light doesn't burn anymore, it warms you. The sky was on fire. But now, there is light again. I didn't set out to become a collector of silences, but that's what the years had made of me. A keeper of pauses, the archivist of an absence. Even now, writing this by a window the morning has just touched, I can feel the old reflex tug at my muscles. A flinch, practiced into fluency. It comes before thought, the way a bird's wing knows the air before the bird is aware it's flying. The difference is that now the reflex loosens. The light arrives and I do not brace for disappearance. I let it arrive the way I would let a long-awaited guest step over the threshold and leave their shoes by the door, rain still shining on the leather. I think of childhood as a house with rooms I'm still entering, rooms I once closed off with quilts and hands over my eyes. The child I was believed that safety came from smallness, that if I could make myself the size of a whisper, the light would pass over me the way wind passes over tall grass. My mother called me dramatic in the voice that parents use when they are frightened by what they cannot name. I can forgive that now. She hadn't been taught to read a child's body for the meanings it holds apart from language. She saw a girl hiding from lamps and thought it was a story I had made up to avoid chores, bedtime, or guests. She didn't know I was already hiding from something that arrived without footsteps or sound. The flash that haunted me did not have sound because it didn't need it. Sound is a line drawn through time. The flash was a room with no walls. It reached me everywhere at once. I couldn't tell teachers that. I couldn't tell the pediatrician standing in the mint-smelling office that the waiting room magazine seemed to hold a secret page where the paper was hot and white. So I learned the slow manners of avoidance. I learned where the fluorescent tubes buzzed, which classrooms faced east and caught the violent clarity of morning, which relatives loved taking photos, and when to excuse myself to get water. The body is a gifted cartographer of danger. It maps escape routes without our permission. I used to imagine joy as something with teeth, not to bite but to gleam. I thought, if I laugh too hard, something will notice and come for me. If I twirl in summer light like other children, the sky will open, and the old white will pour down, and the room will be gone, and I will be left hovering in nothing again. So I became careful with happiness the way you are careful with a fragile glass. I sipped it, never gulped. I left half full. It was in my 40s that the architecture shifted. The dreams were not like other dreams. They didn't have the distortion of fever or the nonsense of the subconscious. They had the clean lines of something remembered, edges that matched my own edges. The river was too specific to be invented. Greenish blue, as if the water had swallowed fields and kept their color. I woke carrying the sound of a woman's humming the way you carry a scent on your hair after you've passed a bakery. The girl's voice landed on me like sunlight on a wall, a small, clear square of happiness. It hurt because it fit. I wrote because writing was the only way to arrest the evaporations. Morning steals the details from dreams with gentle, ruthless hands. The notebook let me hide them, still wet between pages. As the weeks curved into a shape, the repetition refused to be coincidence. Rivers prefer patterns. Memories do too. The hand slipping from mine, the white fabric, the bridge cracking like ice. A molecular logic underneath, like the structure of snow. When I found the photograph, it felt less like discovery and more like recognition. As if the world had finally lifted a veil to allow a face to look back that had been waiting there all along. The photograph wasn't dramatic. It was domestic, almost. The river curved modestly. The shop was small. The woman and the child were simply living, their hands connected by a short rope of tenderness. And yet all the air around them was already trembling at a frequency I could feel through the screen. The caption said Hiroshima, but my body had already said it before I could read. The body is older than language. It speaks in weather. The sky was on fire. The words tasted like metal and rain. They anchored me because they admitted something terrible and refused to look away. I did not say them out loud at first, only in the meantime. Elevators, bathrooms, crosswalks, any place where a flare of brightness could strike. When I whispered them, the light became less a predator and more a phenomenon. Naming lets you stand next to something. I stood next to the words, hard. I asked them to teach me how to breathe. The testimonies I read were not mine and must never be stolen. That is important to say. But there is a quiet way to listen to other people's pain. To hold it in your palm like water, never clenching. When I read, I felt as if the cicadas themselves had agreed to be translated for me. There were details that sound does not usually carry, the way heat has a direction, the way air can harden. I did not know how I knew, only that my bones leaned forward as if they were hearing their own story told in a voice with a different accent. Desperation is a kind of gravity. It pulled me across maps. On the plane I looked down at clouds so bright I almost closed the shade. But I didn't. I told the old fear it could ride along without driving. The wing cut a white curve through the sky and left no scar behind. That image became a secret practice. You can move and not injure what you move through. The plane landed, as all planes do, a brief piece of violence softened by relief. I stepped into humidity and the ordinary miracle of the world going on, Hiroshima, in summer, is a lace of light and water. The river doesn't shout, it carries. People cross bridges with bags and bicycles and snacks for children. Couples stop to take photos. The air over the Peace Park feels tenderized, as if every footstep is aware that every other foot has already been there. There is a canopy of trees that weren't there then. They lean over the walkways as if to listen. I walked until evening, a stranger moving through a place that treated me with a gentleness that made my throat ache. I thought of how many strangers had moved through this place earlier, unrecorded, undone, and I tried with each breath to be worthy of the air I was borrowing. When I saw the bridge, time bent obligingly, like a reed under water. My heart conducted an old orchestra, strings rising not with drama but inevitability. I stood still and felt the past reach through my skin to take my pulse. She was there, not as a ghost but as a continuity. The red ribbon in her hair wasn't a symbol, it was cloth. It had been tied that morning by hands that wanted her hair away from her face, who wanted her to see clearly the world that wanted her. I didn't lift my hand to her then. I let the recognition be without gesture. Recognition is already a gesture. It is the body turning toward. At the inn, the candle cast a small sun. You'd think I would fear the flame, but I didn't. A flame is an honest light. It moves as if it's thinking. Each flicker a syllable, eyes. I opened the notebook and wrote the way water understands a riverbed, by remembering where it has already gone. When the air warmed my hands and the smell of rain rose from nowhere, I thought, perhaps this is what it means to be accompanied by the dead without being claimed by them. Perhaps memory is a bridge we can both stand on, each on our own side, waving without pulling. The museum is a house for grief that refuses to be abstract. The glass cases say, "This is what heat does to a lunchbox. This is how time stops inside a watch. This is what fabric remembers even after fire." The red ribbon was small. The bow was shy, almost. It had survived in a shape meant for play. I wanted to kneel in front of it the way you kneel in front of a child to be at their height. Instead, I stood and breathed as if my lungs were the right container for witnessing. That was all I could do. That is sometimes all there is. The sky was on fire. I said it like a promise this time. And something loosened in me, the old knot that had tied every brightness to an ending. I realized that my fear had not been of light but of abandonment. The flash had erased the world but left me, and I had taught myself to believe that was what light did, keep me and take everything else. I thought I must refuse joy to keep company with the vanished. But what if remembrance is not a prison? What if it is a door held open gently? When I came home, I did not perform a miracle. I performed mourning. I opened blinds. I made coffee with the window full of day. I let the sun put its warm hand on my shoulder, and I didn't pull away. It is astonishing how ordinary mercy can look. Even the panes of glass seemed to change, as if they were relieved to finally do their job for me fully, to be a lens, not a shield. The dreams softened. They didn't leave. They rearranged themselves into scenes with air. The girl stopped running to reach me, perhaps because I had crossed the bridge the other way and met her where she stood. We watched water as if the river were a film we were both content to sit through. In the last dream, she asked a question not because she didn't know the answer, but because she needed to hear me say it. "Is it over now?" And I said yes. The word felt like cool hands on a fevered forehead. People ask as if belief is the only currency that buys meaning. Do you believe in past lives? Do you believe you were there? I think belief is a smaller word than the phenomenon requires. Memory is not loyal to a single passport. It moves the way light moves, across, through, reflecting, refracting, returning. I have come to trust that some things attach to us not by logic but by resonance. We carry what we are built to carry. Sometimes what we carry is the unspent compassion of an earlier world. Sometimes it is the cry someone could not complete. I think of a mother and a daughter whose names I do not know. I think of the morning their hands connected, of the seamstress who ironed the kimono, of the shopkeeper who stacked goods, of the neighbor who watered a plant in a clay pot, of the boy who practiced a song for school, of a dog dozing in a doorway. The world before is the world we live in now, uninterrupted except by our forgetfulness. Even annihilation could not finish the work of tenderness. A ribbon, charred but tied, is proof. There were other things I did not write down before. The small talk with a woman at a vending machine who showed me how to coax a can of coffee from its slot and laughed when it was too hot to hold. The old man on a bench who fed crumbs to pigeons and nodded when I sat. The two of us participating in a quiet that didn't belong to language. The child who ran past trailing bubbles on a stick like soft planets. These were not symbolic moments. They were exactly themselves. And yet together they added weight to the scale that had always felt tipped toward absence. Presence learned to accumulate. Back home, my husband watched me as if I were a porch light that had come back on after a storm. There was no ceremony, only a steadiness. We began to eat dinner by the window in the blue hour. I found that I could listen to fireworks in July while sitting inside a pool of dusk. The booms still struck, but the flashes did not take me. They pressed briefly against the glass and dissolved. Children squealed, and in their sound I heard not threat but continuance. The earth doing one of its oldest rituals, astonishment. You might ask what forgiveness looks like when the one to be forgiven is not a person but an event. I think forgiveness, in this case, is the refusal to let the event be the final editor of your life. It is the act of returning to the river and stepping into it with both feet, and letting the cold hold you and saying, I am here in this year and this body, and the past is here too, and we are allowed to be in the same water without drowning each other. Once, after I returned, I sat in a dark movie theater, and a sudden white filled the screen. I felt the old signal flare in my chest, the alarms turning on, but they seemed embarrassed, as if they had arrived at a party in the wrong clothes. The scene passed. I remained. I put my hand over my heart not to calm it, but to thank it for how long it had guarded me. We can thank what hurt us when we understand the cost of its vigilance. I started to keep a second notebook. Not for dreams, but for light. Each day I would write a single sentence about where I saw it. On the metal rim of a jar, on a rain puddle in a parking lot, carrying a fragment of sky like a small debt paid. On the cheek of an old friend leaning across a table to tell me a joke. On dust. On a key. On a knuckle. The sentences taught me to look without bracing. Sometimes the practice felt silly. Often it felt like prayer. The river in my dreams changed with the seasons the way rivers do. In autumn it carried leaves like letters never mailed. In winter it wore a thin skin of ice at the edges. The kind that shatters under a fingertip and makes a sound so soft it feels private. In spring it rushed, serious with purpose. And in summer it slowed, a green rope being pulled lazily through the city. The girl matched her pace to the water. I matched mine to hers. In none of these dreams did the flash come. It had migrated from an interruption to a memory of an interruption. That is different. That difference is the quiet on which entire lives are built. I began to understand that the fear I'd carried for decades had not only been about the event itself, but about the loneliness after. To be left in a white room alone, that was the ache. The terror we can sometimes withstand, the solitude afterward can undo us. But I was not alone now, and perhaps I had never been. The humming woman from that first dream, the small hand. They were a chorus stitched into the lining of my life. I had only needed to turn the garment inside out to see them. Sometimes I still smell smoke where there is none. When I do, I go to the kitchen and toast bread. I let the air fill with the domestic echo of the scent until my body learns to tell the difference between catastrophe and breakfast. It is not disrespect. It is retraining. The nervous system is faithful to a fault. It needs cues more than arguments. On the anniversary that the city remembers with lanterns, I did my own small ceremony at home. I cut paper into squares and wrote names I did not know and placed them in a bowl of water. I turned off the lights and watched the paper soften and curl and bloom. The room felt held. It is possible to honor without claiming. It is possible to be claimed by a story without stealing it. Sometimes I imagine the lives that followed for those who survived, the ways they carried on, the things they rebuilt, the laughter they permitted themselves when the world allowed it. I think of the lineage of hands. How many hands since then have tied red ribbons into hair, not knowing why the gesture feels holy, only that it does. I think of all the girls who run across all the bridges. The world is full of them still. This is what light is for. I have learned that memory can be a soft animal. If you make a home for it, it curls up and sleeps instead of pacing and knocking things over. My home for it is simple. A clean counter, a morning light that doesn't surprise, a notebook, a window. My life is not extraordinary. That is the point. The extraordinary had already happened, the terror and the grace. And now the work is to let the ordinary be enough without fear of theft. There are days when the phrase returns on its own. The sky was on fire. When it does, I let it. Sometimes I say it out loud as I pour water into a plant's thirsty soil, or as I fold a shirt, or as I stand at the sink and watch a line of ants navigate a crumb with civic ambition. The phrase settles over the room like a shawl. It does not sear. It warms. I think perhaps this is what the word, blessing, means when it is clean of all spectacle. A warmth that doesn't ask to be noticed and yet does its work anyway. Grief has taught me that time is elastic when bent by love. The woman and child I recognized in that photograph live now in my mornings, with a gentleness that no longer requires me to choose between them and the life I've built. When I open the blinds, I open the bridge. When I watch the river from a dream move in the leaves of the maple outside my house, I understand that continuity is not a chain but a current. You cannot hold it. You can stand in it and feel it pass through you and be washed clean. If there is a lesson, it is not one I would dare to prescribe. It is simply this, that the body has reasons as old as the world, and that to listen to those reasons without shame is a form of respect. That light is not a verdict. That heat is not always a herald. That silence, even after violence, can be a meadow where the living and the dead meet for a picnic and share bread and do not frighten each other. I still keep the photograph printed and tucked into my notebook. I do not look at it every day. But when I do, I think, you are a doorway. You led me back not only to a city but to myself. You led me into the river and out of the white room. You taught me that fear can be a faithful dog who only needs to be told, gently, to lie down. You taught me that endurance looks like a charred ribbon still tied in a bow. The sky was on fire. The sentence is a horizon line. On one side, a world burning. On the other, a woman who learned, slowly, to let brightness touch her without bracing, who returned not to relive but to release, who found that what survives isn't only sorrow. What survives is the way a hand reaches for another in the second before a bridge, in the instant before a flash, in the hours after, in the years after, in a morning like this one where sunlight spills too fast through the blinds and I do not hide. I let it come in. I let it lay itself across the floor, stripes of gold like river water inside the house. I put my bare feet into it the way the girl once ran across a bridge. Not because she wasn't afraid, perhaps, but because love propelled her faster than fear could. I stand there as long as it takes for warmth to become ordinary again. And when it does, I pick up my pen and write the oldest truth I know. The sky was on fire. But now there is light again, and I am here to see it,